United States and Russia have completed a major prisoner swap, the largest in post-Soviet history, with Moscow releasing Wall Street Journal reporter Evan Gershkovich and fellow American Paul Whelan in a multinational deal. In fact, Thursday's swap set some 24 people free, according to officials in Turkey, where the exchange took place. The West obtained the release of 16 people from Russia, including 5 Germans and 7 Russian political prisoners, according to a statement by the US president. Russia, meanwhile, secured the freedom of several of its own nationals convicted of serious crimes in the West.
The deal that made this possible was a feat of diplomacy and friendship. Multiple countries helped get this done. They joined the difficult, complex negotiations at my request, and I personally thank them all again. And I've thanked them personally, and I'll thank them again. All told, Russia has released 16 prisoners. 8 Russians who are being held in the West will be sent home as well. These 16 prisoners from Russia that Russia has released include 4 Americans, 5 Germans, 7 Russian citizens who are political prisoners in their own country.
For further clarity, we have with us Executive Director of RSF USA, Clayton Weimers. Thanks so much, Clayton, for joining us on the NDTV network. The trade unfolded despite relations between Washington and Moscow being at their lowest points since the Cold War after Putin's invasion of Ukraine. What was your first reaction to the news of the prisoner swap, Clayton?
My first reaction when I heard the news was pure relief. We have been fighting to get Evan released for 16 long months. It's been an arduous process, but this makes it all worth it. And I have to give a lot of credit to our partners who have been working on this, especially the Wall Street Journal, his employer, who has done an amazing job of keeping Evan's story in the news and in the public consciousness. And I have to tip my hat to everyone working in the Special Presidential Envoy for Hostage Affairs Office at the State Department, who have done incredibly professional work in securing this historic deal. I also want to mention Alsu Kurmasheva, the American journalist for Radio Free Europe, Radio Liberty, who is also part of this deal. We have confirmed that she's been freed and will be rejoining her family very soon. She's been detained for the past 9 months, also for the crime of journalism. It has been clear for some time now that journalism is effectively illegal in Russia. The Kremlin has completely cracked down on the free press, and it is taking state hostages who are journalists in order to hold them for a later trade to secure Russian prisoners from abroad.
Right. In fact, I came across a report that mentioned negotiators in back-channel talks at one point also explored an exchange involving Russian opposition leader Alexei Navalny. Could you share some details on how such deals are reached, Clayton?
Sure. Well, it all takes place very secretly at the highest levels. We are very aware of the important work that officials at the State Department have been doing all along to secure Evan and Alsu's release from prison, and apparently have been doing a great deal of work to secure even more prisoners, because this prisoner swap it includes a huge number of detainees. It really is a historic day and such a happy day for all of these wrongfully detained prisoners who are going to get to rejoin their families and walk free again, when frankly they didn't know if they ever would be able to. So it's a hugely hopeful day, but we should also remember, these journalists should not have been in jail in the first place. They were arrested for being journalists. They were convicted of crimes associated with their journalism. And it's clear that this is the tactic that the Kremlin is going to use going forward. And it's paying dividends for them in that they are able to secure the release of very high value Russian prisoners in foreign prisons. These people include assassins, convicted spies, arms traffickers. It's really astonishing, the level of criminal that's been exchanged for wrongly detained journalists. It's clear that democracies of the world need to find a way to increase the cost of bad actors like the Russian regime from taking hostages of journalists and other citizens who don't belong in prison.
But you know, Clayton, there are strong arguments that this deal, like others before it, reflect about an innate imbalance because the US and allies gave up Russians charged or convicted of serious crimes in exchange for Russia releasing journalists, dissidents, and others imprisoned by the country's highly politicized legal system on charges seen by the West as trumped up. Then what is the significance of the timing of this deal, given these are Joe Biden's last few months in office?
Well, it certainly is a feather in his cap. This will be definitely a part of his legacy as president going forward. It is always extremely complicated to negotiate the release of American prisoners who are held abroad, particularly in a country where the relations are particularly hostile with Washington. And to be able to secure 4 American prisoners in one deal, 3 American prisoners in a single deal, 2 journalists plus Paul Whelan, another American citizen, it's really a coup.
Well, you touched upon this briefly, but let's just dive into it deeper. How difficult has it become for journalists globally to report freely and be critical of those in power as more autocratic leaders rise to the fore?
Yeah, well, RSF puts out an annual ranking of every country's press freedom in the world in our World Press Freedom Index. And in 2024, we found the greatest decline in press freedom across the board that we've ever recorded, which speaks to the deteriorating conditions for journalism in many parts of the world. That's reflected in authoritarian backsliding in once strong democratic countries. And an increased hostility towards the press, especially from far right and far left movements around the world. But we talk often about this problem of impunity for crimes against journalists.
Right.
And I think that's really important because too seldom are we able to impose any kind of a cost or a penalty to the autocrats and the other bad actors who are arresting, harassing, even killing journalists. We all need to do a better job of holding these people accountable so that journalists can be safe to do their essential jobs. There is no democracy without journalism. And so every time a journalist is prevented from doing their jobs, the rest of us citizens understand the world a little bit worse.
Indeed. Clayton, also the Russian side got Vadim Krasikov, who was actually convicted in Germany in 2021 and sentenced to life in prison for killing a former Chechen rebel. Russia also received 2 alleged sleeper agents jailed in Slovenia, as well as 3 men who were charged by federal authorities in the US. Don't you think Russia has a bit of an advantage in such prisoner swap deals?
Well, yeah, that's a really important point. There's this huge discrepancy because the United States and other strong democracies are not going around arbitrarily arresting Russian journalists to hold them for future exchanges like this. And look at the type of prisoner that is going back to Russia in exchange for not just journalists, but human rights activists. They're assassins, they're warlords, they're arms dealers, they're hackers. They're spies. These are very high value prisoners who have been convicted of very serious crimes. It's clear that that's the Kremlin's playbook, is to arbitrarily arrest Americans and other Western citizens in order to hold them as bargaining chips, and we have to find a response to that.
Clayton, thanks so much for joining us with the latest updates. Really appreciate you making time for us on the World 24/7.